To start with, the topic that I've chosen today is a topic which is at a very nascent stage of its development, especially considering the duration of our laws as such, which have spanned for over 2 centuries now. Webinars have been conducted and I have been part of them as an attendee on various subjects. But this is one subject which I felt is evolving in nature. And in my period where I interned as a law student, and I'm assuming most of y'all are as well, I did come across as one of the most interesting persons in our legal profession. That's Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran, who's a partner of Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan. And he was always, and he ensured us that we always held a book in our hands. So one of the things that he always told me as a student and all of his interns was that you need to keep reading up on law, keep to be reading. So one of the things that he had always mentioned to me as a student was that you need to keep studying and reading about evolving subjects because the study of law is something that never ceases at any point in time. You continue to be a student of law until you hold on to your last breath. So keeping in terms of that thought in mind, I thought I would pick up a subject which is about cryptocurrency, which in its existence itself has been from the year 2009. And India's jurisprudence, well, to put it so, is the jurisprudence has been restricted to only one judgment, which only came in April of this year, which I will be discussing during the course of the entire discussion that I'm having here. And along with that, there would be a couple of notifications and press releases that have come from the RBI. And this in whole is what the Indian legal framework has been around cryptocurrency. What I will endeavor to do during this entire discussion or present to you my views and thoughts, and at the same time get an exchange of your views and thoughts, is as to see that where do we see cryptocurrency under the Indian legal framework? What are the extant laws about it? Obviously, we cannot predict in terms of what laws might be brought in, what legislation will be put forth before us, but we certainly can discuss within the existing parameters, and especially the Supreme Court having already expressed its opinion on this one topic, to see as to where we can go forward from it and chart the course of it after this hiatus on COVID-19. So before I begin, also, I would like to put across certain disclaimers which are necessary because it should be clear out there as to what is my intent behind presenting this. One to start off with is that I'm not advocating at any point in time the use of cryptocurrency because I myself don't use it. So I can definitely not tell you the pros, cons, whether it's a good investment, not a good investment. Since I use the word investment, I would also put in the second disclaimer, which is to say that it is not an investment advice that I'm giving. And even my experience on this entire subject has been as that of a student. Having put across these disclaimers, I would like to start with, I think it's important before I start with anything to put across the evolution of currency and money in our society. So to start with that, I think we would all go back to what we have been taught in our early days and our primitive years of education. That is about the barter system. And that is what we initially call as the form of exchange of currency, is that goods would be traded by one person to another. But I think from what I've read about the history about it as well is that the barter system had its own inherent defect, which was if assuming I am someone who trades in a perishable commodity and the other person, say for example, if I take Sunita for this matter of fact, as the other person who deals with something which is non-perishable, say for example, a grain, then there is always the element of want and need. How much is the want for a particular thing and how much is the demand and the supply for the other thing at the same time. So there was always an imbalance in that sense, and that's why there was always a necessary to bring in a third commodity into the aspect or a third angle to the aspect, which is desired by everyone. And that desirability is where money or currency comes into play. The earliest forms of currency that we have historically seen are in the form of either cattle, or in places like Alaska is what historically been told is that it used to be animal skin. And in parts of Southeast Asia, it was something like seashell. Now, further problems obviously devolved on this topic is because of the divisibility factor of it. What if I do not want to give you the entire shell, or what if I did not want to give you the whole of my cattle for what you're giving me? So divisibility, the lack of divisibility of that brought on us to a further course of evolution, which happened to be coins or metal. I wouldn't go into coins because that comes at a later stage, but in the form of metal, which used to be precious metal. Now, precious metal also would at any point in time only be weighed to a certain extent, and that would then become a medium of exchange. But the problem with metal is that metal is a heavy object, and transporting a heavy sum of metal always exposes it to robbery, theft, and other antisocial elements. And that's where I think about the 16th and the 17th century is where we saw the whole system of banknotes coming in. How it would happen is an individual would go to a bank and present whatever gold and silver he or she had. And in exchange of that, the bank would give them a note saying that so and so person has deposited with us gold or silver worth an X and Y amount. And then I would use that note to buy something or trade something, receive goods and services, if I may put it in the most basic form. And then I would hand over that note to the particular person, which that person would then go to the bank and get the equivalent amount of gold or silver from it. So this is how traditionally the early days have been. And here is where I would like to pause and discuss as to what have been or what has been discussed by a lot of economists. And here I'm quoting one famous economist by the name of Nicholas Mankey as to what are the important ingredients or what forms the core essence of currency. The first and the foremost test of what he has called for anything to qualify as currency is that it should form a medium of exchange. Medium of exchange, as the words might put it, is to basically be able to exchange a particular good or a particular service for a value or a consideration. After having explored that, we go into the second bit, which is in terms of it being a unit of account. When we put it in terms of what is a unit of account, we say that it is a unit of account by which you are able to describe or put into certain terms what a particular good or service is a value of. To say that a kilo of grain costs 100 rupees is putting it to a unit of account. And the last and the most important factor is that it provides you a value of storing. And that is the most key aspect, is to say that the reason that we hold on to money and we save money is to be able to expend it at a future time for an expense that we have envisioned in terms of our daily expenses, or expenses that may not come and would come in a situation like this, such as a pandemic, about healthcare issues and so on and so forth. So that is the third and the most crucial aspect about money, that it has an intrinsic value which you can store onto. And while we're doing this, I would urge you to keep these three factors in mind, because these three factors about what currency is and what Nicholas Mankey has told us is what we will discuss at a later point when we come to the legislation that has been brought forth in India. So fast forward, like taking a step back again, is where I explained to you what currency had been in the earlier 16th and 17th century in terms of the banks in England giving you a note or a receipt indicating what currency. Fast forward that to today's scenario is what we see, and especially in the early 1970s, where until 1970s, if I may put it so, is about currency was determined by the value of gold. And you would always see that is that it used to be a legal tender to say that anyone who bears an X amount of money or an X note would be given a gold worth X and Y amount. This primarily globally stopped into practice after the Gulf War, which was especially brought in by Nixon. Richard Nixon, the former United States president, did do away with the whole system of equating currency to gold reserves. And this was important because what was noticed at that point in time was that people resorted to buying gold and other precious jewelry and stones or metal when especially there used to be a time of crisis. So it was very difficult for a currency to be valued on the basis of a metal. And this devaluation or this separation of currency from gold brought about a scenario or a situation where the sanctity of a currency was reduced only to a legal tender. When I say what it means as a legal tender is that that paper is not more worth than what it is printed on. To put it in even more sort of technical terms, it would say that the face value of that currency is much more than the intrinsic value of it. And where does the currency derive its intrinsic value from? the currency derives its intrinsic value from the person or the organization that has printed the currency, which in this case would be the central bank of each of the countries. And in our case, that would be the Reserve Bank of India. Why am I explaining all of this? The only reason that I'm explaining all of this is because it forms the underpinnings of where the whole concept of cryptocurrency or virtual currency comes in from. The reason why we place so much faith, or the reason that the currency derives its value, although it is not worth the paper it is printed on, is because there is an element of trust in an organized society. And when I say that element of trust in the organized society, I primarily place the faith on the central bank or the particular bank that is printing the currency. So what is this element of trust? The element of trust is that you believe, and I'm saying this in very layman terms, not as an economist or something like that, is that you place trust or faith in the Reserve Bank or in the central bank of your country that I will get the goods worth the currency that I hold in my pocket. That at any point in time, there would be a bit of variation, obviously, inflation and so on and so forth will be the factors which determine it. But by and large, whatever the note that is handed to me, I shall be able to get goods and services worth that much amount. And it is this very whole trust factor which keeps the whole money currency economy going for us. And a large diversion from that is where cryptocurrency and virtual currency comes in from. So moving on to the next topic is that what is, now again, there's a distinction. What we have heard is that the nomenclatures vary. People put cryptocurrency under the subset of virtual currency at the same time. But for the sake of discussion, and if one is to go through even the judgment of the Supreme Court of India, is that virtual currency is being held on a different footing, or sorry, rather on the same footing as cryptocurrency. But virtual currency, as we see, is another form that is already around us right now. Virtual currency could be in the form of what we use today as Amazon Money, Ola Pay, and so on and so forth, where effectively, again, coming back to the same principles that Nicholas Mankiev propounded to us, is that that does not form the traditional currency for the simple reason that it can be only used for a particular purpose, and goods and values can be only ascribed to a certain value from the same forum or exchange from where you're getting that currency. So virtual currency is what we have already seen. It also exists in the form of, say, credit card points that you might have from any credit card agency whom you've got your credit cards from, where you can trade those points for services or goods on their particular website. So this is in a very short nutshell as to what virtual currency has been. Now moving on to cryptocurrency and where it came from. And I'm sure a lot of people or the participants on this call are people who have believed in. So having described what virtual currency is, let's move on to the concept of cryptocurrency. Now, a lot of people who are part of this video call are, I'm assuming, do know or fairly have knowledge of or must have heard about cryptocurrency. Well, cryptocurrency had its origination in 2009 when the subprime mortgage crisis occurred in the United States, with the whole Lehman Brothers scam and everything, all of those things. And it goes by the name that one person, Mr. Satoshi Nakamoto, which no one knows even now, and is a fascinating mystery as to whether he is indeed a real person or not, came up with a white paper about what should be cryptocurrency. And what he believed cryptocurrency to be in a very nutshell is to be a form of virtual currency, a currency which is never printed, never doled out by a central institution, and a record of which is maintained by every single person. I mean, I may not have explained it to you in the best possible terms, but to relate it back to the already existing currency market that we have is one of the most important distinctions from it is the lack of centralization. And when I say lack of centralization, is that where a currency note that is there in your pocket right now gets printed from a central bank or from a central authority. It does not happen so in cryptocurrency. The amount of cryptocurrency that can be given out or doled out at any point in time has been restricted or curtailed, which is again another glaring difference from the existing currency system, wherein that a reserve bank or any central bank at any point in time can and in fact has the authority to print as much as currency as you want. So there is always a fear of devaluation of that currency in case the currency is printed more than what the demand for the currency is. And lastly, and the most important bit is in terms of the traceability and the system underlying it.
The system underlying it is what has popularly been known or is being discussed in a lot of social circles and in terms of financial circles as a blockchain technology. Now, here is where no one should take it as a pseudonymous that blockchain technology means cryptocurrency at any point in time. Blockchain technology simply is the underpinnings on which the cryptocurrency system works. What is blockchain technology? Blockchain technology is a simple technology which basically says that a ledger system is maintained of every system, of every currency exchange which happens between n number of persons in a circle of transaction. And A, there is an element of secrecy in it, and B, there is this element that it cannot be tampered with at any point in time, which basically is to say that if I was to give a rupee 10 note to a person A, that entry can only be reversed or can be cancelled or be nullified only if person A gives me back the rupee 10. Therefore, what happens is that at all points in time, there is a circle or there is a chain maintained in terms of where the money will flow, who the money goes to, and where the money originates from. Obviously, it's not out there in the public domain, but it's always whoever's party to the entire transaction does get a say. And to be fair enough, this is quite a revolutionary system which has come into play, and a system which has now been adopted by a lot of banks in terms of, and obviously corporate institutions, to further their economic growth in terms of a real-time coordination in terms of transactions that have occurred and getting results in a much more prompt and an efficient manner. Proponents of cryptocurrency have even argued this before the Supreme Court is that if banks have accepted blockchain technology, what is the harm in accepting cryptocurrency? In my limited knowledge, I think that is a fallacious argument for the simple reason that a technology is something that can be used for n number of purposes. It could be good on one footing, it could be bad on another footing. That does not mean that because they form part of the same technology, it has to be accepted universally. To give a best example, one would say that internet is good because one can surf and get knowledge on the internet. But at the same point in time, malicious malware and software and cyber attacks do also happen on the forum of internet. So do you mean to say that it gets justified simply because it comes from the same medium of internet? There I would disagree that it does not. Now, having basically told you what cryptocurrency has been in the entire scenario globally, or in terms of where it has reached, it is important to discuss in the Indian context what it has been, because that is what affects most of us. So where do we start with? We basically need to start with the first press release of the RBI, which came on 24th December 2013. This was the first press release, or in essence, the first indication of any regulatory body expressing its opinion on cryptocurrency. And what it basically did is it warned the general public at large to not deal with virtual currencies, as it was an unregistered and unregulated form on which RBI had no form of control or authority over. This was further followed up by another press release on the 1st of February 2017, where the RBI simply pointed out saying that no licenses have been issued to any person or any organization, and that is why people should stay their hands away and not deal with cryptocurrency. Then comes in the most important bit is the RBI notification of 6th April 2018, which ended up being the subject matter before the Supreme Court, and subsequently the judgment of the Supreme Court came in April of 2020. Now, what did this notification put out? This notification, in very simple terms, said that, and the underlying basis of this was that RBI was worried about banks which were exposed to cryptocurrency, in the sense that people were using their bank accounts to deal with cryptocurrency or to trade in cryptocurrency. Being the large-scale issues in terms of its usability, in terms of its safety, in terms of its possibility of being used in nefarious activities, the central government and the RBI felt it is necessary to ring-fence the banks which fall under the RBI radar. And that is where the 6th April 2018 RBI notification came in, which in basic points put across to banks that you shall not deal with cryptocurrency, and if you are dealing with cryptocurrency, cease your operations within 3 months of time. And this is what I think was in terms of a water break moment for the cryptocurrency world in India, because for the first time an authority had put it out in clear-cut terms as to what is the stand of the government or the stand of a regulatory authority in terms of cryptocurrency, where it expressly barred any banks from undertaking any further transactions which dealt with cryptocurrency. Therefore, what had happened and the effect and the cause and the effect of this entire thing was that bank accounts where cryptocurrencies were being dealt with, and especially in this case, where virtual currency exchanges which were registered and operating from India were frozen by the bank accounts. The freezing of the bank accounts meant that the parties ended up approaching the Supreme Court, and I will come to the judgment a little later. Going forward with what happened after this notification. After this notification were reports and statements put out by the finance minister in its budget saying that the RBI is looking into the entire process and there would be a mechanism or a system put in place to deal with cryptocurrency. And what came in first was a surprising bill of 2018. This was a bill in 2018 which came up for the first time with the idea, and which is obviously a demarcation from what the RBI had said, and a clear distinction from whatever has been discussed till now, is that the bill proponent was that they would be regulating cryptocurrency and there would be regulations and checks and balances put in place for people to deal with cryptocurrency. And this was a shot in the arm for the entire cryptocurrency industries because India, for the first time, put across the point that it is ready to regulate cryptocurrency and it's not going out for a blanket ban. However, this entire scenario changed when a subsequent bill came in. And this bill came in pursuant to a select committee, which had the heads of RBI, SEBI, and the finance secretary being a part of it, which abrogated a complete ban on cryptocurrency. And when I say just cryptocurrency, the act, if I may just put it in very short words, is that the act banned storing and mining as well as dealing in cryptocurrency, which means any form or act, including an allied activity of mining of cryptocurrency, was expressly barred in India. And again, now here is where I initially pointed out to you that it is important to keep the principles of Nicholas Mankiw in mind in terms of discussing cryptocurrency. While keeping that principle in mind, one has to simply look at the bill to say that what is the government of India's stance in terms of cryptocurrency, because the act and a specific section of the act, quoting the very same 3 grounds of Nicholas Mankiw, says that since cryptocurrency does not satisfy any of these 3 grounds, it cannot be deemed as a currency, it cannot be considered as a substitute of currency, and that is why the trading and dealing in cryptocurrency shall be expressly barred. So having put forth this entire scenario, I think it is important. And also, lastly, is that the punishment that was prescribed for this entire act, under this entire act, was an imprisonment ranging from 1 year to 10 years. In the entire legislative background and the background that in terms of whatever notifications, press releases, and other regulatory orders, as well as statement from the finance minister was brought in, is why we need to now come on and discuss the judgment of the Supreme Court, which was passed in this issue. Well, judgment of the Supreme Court, and without dealing or divulging much into the facts of the case and putting it very simply forward, I will directly move on to the submissions because I think most of us do know what would have been the possible arguments on behalf of the proponents of cryptocurrency. One being in terms of the blockchain technology, which I already spoke about, that when there's an acceptance of the technology underlying cryptocurrency, where is the harm or what is the reason for barring cryptocurrency as a whole? Secondly, that RBI has absolutely no powers to regulate cryptocurrency, and that is why this notification or this press release should fall. Well, Supreme Court basically categorized this into 5 grounds on which it went into, or 5 issues on which Supreme Court rendered its finding. And curiously, 4 out of those 5 were in favor of RBI. And the one proposition on which it fell is the one that we'll be discussing slightly more in detail. The first and foremost is whether RBI did have the power to legislate on the subject. And in that, Supreme Court did go into the entire legislative history of RBI, the institution of RBI as a whole, and its powers and its function in maintaining the economical system in India. And taking a whole pervasive view of that, the Supreme Court did hold that RBI did in fact have the power to legislate. And in this, I will also discuss subsequently is one of the provisions under FEMA, which I think could be subsequently used by the government to bring in a legislation for cryptocurrency. The second issue, what was raised is that it was an arguendo, is that if RBI did in fact have the powers to regulate cryptocurrency, it did in fact not have the powers to ban it. And again, the submission was negated by the RBI to say that once RBI stood vested with the powers to deal with cryptocurrency, banning even cryptocurrency would be within the ambit of RBI. It did not say much in those express words, but that is the reading that one can get, because the question before RBI in this judgment, before the Supreme Court, I apologize there, the question before the Supreme Court was not in terms of the legality of cryptocurrency. The question before the Supreme Court was merely whether the act which was sought to be done by the RBI notification of 6th April 2018 was in line with the vision and the object of the act. And therefore, it never dealt with as to whether cryptocurrency is legal, illegal in the extant judicial system. The third and the fourth submission is which I will take up together, or the fourth issue I'll take up together, is about the non-applicability of mine and a knee-jerk reaction by the RBI. Well, on this, the Supreme Court was very clear to say that the RBI has been monitoring the entire development of cryptocurrency from the year 2012, starting with its very first press release. It issued press releases almost periodically over a period of 1 year each to say that cryptocurrency, people should not deal with it, people may not deal with it, we have not sanctioned it, we have not given any approval for this, and that is why stay your hands away from cryptocurrency. So at no point in time did the Supreme Court feel that the RBI circular of 4th April 2018 was in any way a knee-jerk reaction or suffered from non-application of mine. Lastly, and the most important, where the entire challenge succeeded on behalf of proponents of cryptocurrency and where RBI ended up failing in the entire judgment, was on the doctrine of proportionality. Now, for students of law who already know what doctrine of proportionality is, I will just explain this for people who are not quite well versed with the entire doctrine of proportionality. Is to say that when you do an act, you meaning either the parliament, the legislature, or an authority vested with the legislative power, is to do a particular act. And if that act is to be done, and the end purpose of that act has to be in consonance with the object of the act. Now, what the Supreme Court merely held was that, and this is in terms what the Supreme Court says on this issue of the RBI notification. What the Supreme Court, in one simple line, said that what was the intent with which the RBI notification was brought in did not mean the end purpose of the act of banning any trading in cryptocurrency. And on this, the RBI went primarily, or the Supreme Court went primarily on three instances. The first instance was that it said that there is no ban on virtual currency or cryptocurrency as such. And what it meant is that there is no law today which expressly bars cryptocurrency. There is in fact the 2019 bill, but that bill has not been tabled on the floor of the parliament, nor has there been any discussion on it. So bill just remains a bill, and as we students of law know that without the presidential assent, no bill can be converted into an act. So especially that you do not have a law which bars trading of virtual currency, or bans virtual currency in its absolute sense, then can RBI by a executive fiat, or in this case a regulatory fiat, go ahead and actually bar banks from undertaking transactions which virtual currency exchanges are doing on another basis? And this I may further simplify it by simply taking an example of a person who's dealing with cryptocurrency as an individual, that is you and I, and the other example being a virtual currency exchange, which is basically an exchange like we have the stock exchange for dealing with stocks of listed entities. Same way we have cryptocurrency exchanges which deal with cryptocurrency. Now, the essential distinction that was drawn was individuals who still want to trade in cryptocurrency have multiple ways and forums of still buying and trading in cryptocurrency, because it can never be, you may bring in any form of legislation, but people are smart enough to be able to circumvent it, like China, for example. China has had a complete ban on cryptocurrency. Even internet services which provide only, obviously internet services are also controlled by the government over there. But even there, people have resorted to technology like VPN, where basically they approach a virtual PIN, and they still continue to trade in cryptocurrency. So Supreme Court has also taken note of that in terms of people being ingenious enough to want to trade in cryptocurrency, even though there might be a ban on using the traditional banking channels. So when your idea is never to stop individuals from dealing in cryptocurrency, would it be right on part of the RBI to then bring in a notification and expressly bar a exchange or an organization from merely being a facilitator, allowing two parties to exchange cryptocurrency. And I think this is where Supreme Court drove home its point to simply say that if your end objective was to stop trading in cryptocurrency, then your RBI notification met its end purpose. But when it never had the backing of, or the intent, or the idea, or any sort of legislative thrust to say that we do want to ban cryptocurrency, then definitely your end objective of asking traditional banking channels to not undertake cryptocurrency activities would definitely not mean the end objective. And that is why, on the principle of doctrine of proportionality, coupled with Article 19(1)(g), which is the freedom of carrying on trade and profession, the Supreme Court felt that the circular is ultra vires. Along with that, the Supreme Court also made certain notings in terms of saying that there has been no bank frauds which have been reported as yet. There is one case which is already going on, which is about the Kaun Banega Crorepati coin, which was floated, basically a Ponzi cryptocurrency scheme. But apart from that, one stray instance, there have not been any large-scale reporting in terms of cryptocurrency being a vice to the society. Coupled with that, the Supreme Court also took interest in terms of the fact of the 2018 bill of the central or drafted by the central government to simply say that when the central government in its draft bill has expressly said that it would wish to regulate the entire cryptocurrency industry, albeit that position changed with the 2019 bill, but it said that once the intent has been indicated that you want to regulate it, then you can definitely not have a step or a circumstance manner whereby you are actually banning or stopping the trade in cryptocurrency. And last of least, what the bank simply said is that VC exchanges have a right to carry on their trade and profession, and the bank or the traditional banking channels is the umbilical cord which keeps their profession going. And when you stop that is when you will face the entire issue of the constitutional validity of the RBI notification. So this in terms was what the Supreme Court's judgment said. It's a 180-page judgment, but a very well-written judgment, puts it so. And this is where we are in terms of the position of cryptocurrency. Now, to summarize the judgment, and obviously there are spin doctors on both fences sitting, one for the cryptocurrency and for against cryptocurrency, who would either consider this a victory for cryptocurrency. To be honest, and this is in my limited legal experience, I would say this, is that the doctrine of proportionality does not in any sense validate, or the setting aside of, let me rephrase it this way, is that the setting aside of the RBI notification in no sense validates the act of cryptocurrency. What the Supreme Court, in simpler terms, has simply said is that this particular circular notification which was brought in by the RBI did not mean its end objective. At no point in time did say that trading in cryptocurrency is legal. It has left that ball in the court of the central government to decide whether it wants to regulate or whether it wants to absolutely ban cryptocurrency. So to say that this entire judgment of the Supreme Court is a shot in the arm for cryptocurrency and is a step away from a valid legislation in favor of cryptocurrency, I would disagree with that. Because we already know in terms of where the legislature is heading in terms of cryptocurrency if one has a look at the 2019 bill, which is an absolute ban on cryptocurrency. Now, having that been the position, it would require a diametrical shift in terms of the position where the central government stands to deviate from that and to actually say that, well, we want cryptocurrency in our country. Having said which, I would also further like to throw in a word of caution is that there is always a mechanism of review petitions to be filed in the Supreme Court. The reason why we haven't heard of it is obviously the COVID crisis which is going on right now, where because of which the Supreme Court has just given a blanket extension in terms of the period of limitation to file review petition. And this would be my belief is that the RBI in all probability will in fact go ahead and file a review petition before the Supreme Court. What is the success of the review petition? Well, I mean, again, purely going on past precedents, I would say that a review petition is not usually entertained or given any sense of thought by the Supreme Court. But we have seen of late is in terms of matters of large public importance, like say, for example, the Sabrimala issue or so on and so forth, that the Supreme Court has lent a ear in terms of hearing another perspective on a review petition. So that is something that I would not completely rule out is a filing of the review petition, and secondly, whether that review petition would succeed or not. That is something which is completely in the ambit of the court. Now, having kept that in the ambit of the court, let us now look at what could be the legislative position on this. There is already a bill pending, which obviously has not been tabled on the floor of the parliament. But what I think is another situation which could happen is purely looking at the definition of currency under FEMA. And this, I just have it ready on my computer screen. I will just read it for the benefit of all the viewers. This is section 2H of the FEMA Act, which simply says, which is the definition of currency. And it says, currency includes all currency notes, postal orders, money orders, checks, drafts, traveler's check, letters of credit, bill of exchange, and promissory note, credit cards, or such other instruments as may be notified by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, applying the principle of adjustum generis, one can obviously say that the definition under section 2H is wide enough for the central government to simply bring in an amendment and notify cryptocurrency as being one such form of currency that the RBI could deal with. And having said which, it would then leave it completely to RBI to use its regulatory mechanism to come up with periodic notifications, regulations, as well as press releases if there are any to deal with cryptocurrency. This could be one mechanism. At the same point in time, I would also like to discuss, and this has already been mentioned in the judgment of the Supreme Court, is that when the draft circular for the 2018 draft bill was sent out, SEBI did reply back saying that it is not an authority which is competent to deal with cryptocurrency. So in terms of the financial regulatory regime that we have in our country, with SEBI gone out, I think in all situations, the mantle will completely fall on RBI. And that is where we are heading, at least in terms of a mechanism. And that is what we have also seen under the 2019 bill, where there is also provision to launch a digital rupee, which is basically a digital currency of Indian origin, which could be, in this case, launched by the central government or the Reserve Bank of India. And all powers and authority has been vested in the Reserve Bank of India. So we could see a scenario also that is, one is either the draft bill being tabled on the floor of the parliament, eventually going up through the ladder and then becoming an act with the presidential assent. Or we could in the scenario see that the definition of currency under the FEMA Act being changed and RBI notifying cryptocurrency as one such form of currency, and therefore further regulating it through its own mechanism. What we bring out this, and like to sum it up the entire conversation, is that let us catapult this entire situation to the situation that was there in 2009, where we were facing a crisis, but of a financial nature. Even before the COVID crisis, we saw that the entire financial sector of our country was going through an upheaval. We were seeing banks churning out all of those cases which we have seen in our public domain, bad debts turning out on literally every second day from every big corporate institutions. So we have arrived at a situation, at least in India, where we do see that the faith of the general public in the entire banking system is fading away. Fading away, I would not raise a caution of alarm to say that it's completely gone away or diminished. It's still a very robust system in place. But just focusing that situation with the 2009 situation is to say that we are in almost a completely parallel situation where there is a trust deficit in the financial sector. And when that happens, we have seen that people always look for alternative forms of investment and investing in non-traditional means and measures. Having said which, do I see the central government in this case taking up a headstrong position and going forward with the legislation? I highly doubt that, considering the entire scenario right now in the country. And when there are bigger issues to be dealt with, I don't think cryptocurrency would be one such on their topic of agenda, high on the topic of agenda at this point in time. Therefore, what does this leave us with? Well, at best, and obviously I'm not some crystal ball gazer right now, I can only say this is that I do see for sure that a review petition being filed, and the fate of that would completely be rested on the judges hearing the review petition. But on the legislative front, it seems difficult that India will change its position from the 2018 bill. Well, if it does, then at best, it would be in tune with the 2018 regulation, which calls for a system of checks and balances where exchanges would have to be registered, regular KYC, which is done in cases of banks, like opening up of bank accounts. That would be done for individuals dealing in cryptocurrency. And coming back to the entire objective with which RBI had come up with, which again, like just to throw a small touch on it at the end, is to say that RBI did in fact come up with this entire notification just to ring fence the bank. And when the whole concept of ring fencing the bank is to protect the interests of the general public. It is not to say that cryptocurrency is bad, cryptocurrency should not be dealt with, but it is basically to say that when the confidence in the entire ecosystem or the banking system is shaken, the Supreme Court just does not, the RBI, sorry, in this case, would not want it to be further shaken by any such act being done, which could further be detrimental to the entire system.
Thank you, Suman. That was very interesting. We've had a lot of questions coming up. If I can deal with the ones which are the most highly voted.
Okay.
The first one is, could you please shed some light on disputes in commercial contracts where the currency is crypto? Can the parties initiate proceedings to bar jurisdictions of other countries and claim jurisdiction in India?
To be honest, like to answer this question, the subject matter of the dispute would not be of any concern in terms of raising a jurisdictional issue, to say as much that one can initiate proceeding wherever the situs of the dispute lies, which is to say that if India, or in any case Mumbai or any other city, bears a proximity to the jurisdiction, one can definitely go ahead and initiate proceedings at that jurisdiction. Subject matter, whether in this case, whether it's cryptocurrency, unless cryptocurrency at any point in time is considered to be a proceed of crime, then in that case is the only case where I see that the court would not entertain or would not yield its jurisdiction to such a dispute. But otherwise, purely if it's considered as a commercial contract, I don't see that being an issue in terms of courts yielding to their jurisdiction and entertaining such disputes.
One more question, a very basic question. Can you regulate cryptocurrency when regulation itself goes against the very nature of the cryptocurrency?
Agreed. I mean, it's a very paradoxical situation, to be honest. And basically, one cannot look at cryptocurrency as an isolated ecosystem. Cryptocurrency will have to be looked at in the current system of the currency markets, be the stock market, and see in that case any other form of investment or any other form of market or commodities exchange, for a matter of fact. And why I place emphasis on this is because when you say that cryptocurrency is a system which shall not be regulated, and I would argue otherwise, is because if you listen to any of the cryptocurrency advocates out there, people who advocate the use of cryptocurrency, or even for the matter of fact, the submissions made by the lawyers on behalf of cryptocurrency before the Supreme Court, they have in fact invited regulations to put in place so that at least the Ponzi schemes and the schemes which are not intended to further the entire ecosystem of cryptocurrency can be weeded out. So yes, although it's a catch-22 situation where you say that, well, cryptocurrency was always meant to be unregulated, not have a single authority to deal with it. Well, what the regulation that can be brought in for cryptocurrency is simply to say that there has to be a minimum checks and balances. And I don't think that ever will go against the fabric of the entire model of cryptocurrency. You will still be allowed to trade with it, deal with it, but like I said before, the Reserve Bank of India and especially the central government needs to protect the interests of the larger number of people who also take benefit of the regular banking channels in our country. So I think it is necessary for the larger good.
Are any litigations going on in India or abroad where cryptocurrency or bitcoins is the subject matter? And related to it, can I claim disputes arise out of cryptocurrency as it's illegal in India?
That's the gray area right now. To tell you what cases are, to my knowledge, there is this one case, I think the matter is posted for bail hearing in the Supreme Court, is about this one individual who started a cryptocurrency scheme called as Kaun Banega Crorepati. He launched a cryptocurrency coin, and I think his bail hearing was posted for during this COVID crisis, where he was, I think, required to cough up about 10 crores rupees as bail bond. I don't know the status of the hearing, but apart from this one criminal case, I don't know of any civil cases. And to answer the second limb of the question is whether disputes can be raised. Like I said, there is per se no law right now saying cryptocurrency is illegal. Therefore, any agreement which deals with cryptocurrency would not be rendered void ab initio, and there is definitely a forum to raise that dispute. To what extent courts will entertain it, it would be on a case-to-case basis, but I definitely don't see a bar in terms of initiating dispute resolution mechanism for issues related to cryptocurrency.
Okay. Another question is how does cryptocurrency work?
Well, that's not for a lawyer to answer, to be honest.
I agree with you entirely.
But how does cryptocurrency work is, again, like how do I put it in a very layman term? Well, it's not a currency, it's not a commodity. It is just something which is purely traded on the internet world. And the pricing of it is based on supply and demand. Let me just put it in those many simple terms.
Sure. The last question for today is kindly provide citations of the Supreme Court case with respect to RBI regulating cryptocurrency.
Sure. It is a writ petition civil 528 of 2018. It is the Internet and Mobile Association of India versus RBI. Yeah, it is a judgment dated March 4, 2020 by a bench comprising of Justice Nariman, Justice Bose, and Justice Ram Subramanian. And the judgment was authored by Justice Ram Subramanian. And I think with that, we just end this entire discussion. Thank you for patient hearing, guys.